shared values, leadership. And today we're going to talk about what is excellence, what is this whole business of pursuit of excellence, and so on. See, I come from a family of teachers. My father was a physics professor. And then if you look at my uncles, plenty or 2-3 of them are teachers and professors. My mother-in-law is a teacher. And I've had various discussions with them about their own institutions over time. You know, what happens in your school, what happens in your college, what happens in this case and that case and all that. And then over the last few years, I've also been personally engaged with a lot of schools, either as a part of Yogakshema or as a math teacher in about 3 or 4 schools, or as a trainer for teachers or heads of schools. So this is my sort of collective experience in terms of understanding that institution called a school, not so much the teachers or the heads of schools per se, but about the institution called a school. The positive thing I really take home is, one thing I found as a commonality amongst all teachers is they seem to be extremely passionate about what they do, and they sincerely feel that they should do the best they can towards imparting education to the children. All right. So on that part of it, there is almost 100% thing where people come back and say, the place I feel the most comfortable and happy is the place where I'm interacting with the children and teaching them something and being with the children or something of that nature. The second is, in schools, I find there is still a large place for ideas like ethics, morals, values, and idealism to a large extent. So there is a place for all of those things, which might or might not be there in a private enterprise. Ideas like ethics, morals, values, and idealism. Schools are still relatively small. It could have 500 people or 1,000 children or something like that. They're relatively small organizations and function quite nicely, where most of the teachers seem to know each other. Those are the good parts as far as our school is concerned. But we have to take one step back and understand, where did our school start from? Our schools, when they all started about 50, 60 years back or 70 years back, were primarily public schools or government-run schools. We didn't really have private schools, that many private schools as such. And there is one thing about governments. Governments across the world, not just India, across the world, run on strict processes that need to be adhered to with little flexibility for the individual. That's how governments run. They work on strict processes with little flexibility provided to the individual. There is a slight positive to this, but the negative is it can be extremely soul-killing. And overall, as the governments seem to work broadly, they continue with that kind of a process. Okay, so the basic tenet on which a government operates is it works on what is called theory X. A theory X is an idea that people need to be told what to do. They need to follow a process. We need to measure, monitor, and punish if it is not done. We need to measure, monitor, and punish if it is not done. Okay, it could be a suspension, it could be a complete removal, or any of those things. It is generally a low trust environment. Governments, I'm talking about governments here, where the schools really started, is generally a low trust idea where it is assumed that the individual needs a stick, else he or she will shirk work and laze around. Okay, this is the whole idea called theory X. A private enterprise, in contrast, might not have some of the positives like, say, ethics, morals, values in the same way as a school has, but it does a few things very well, which is it manages to push down decision-making to the lowest level possible on all decisions. Okay, because there is simply no space for people at top to be able to take all kinds of decisions. They either don't have the bandwidth or they don't have the full idea of what is going on there. So all decision-making is pushed down to the lowest level possible. It truly empowers people to take decisions, and it keeps itself updated on some of the latest developments in the space of management, be it strategy, be it systems, values, processes, leadership, and so on and so forth. It keeps itself updated on all of that. Why does it do it? It just does it because that's required for survival in a dog-eat-dog world like a private enterprise. It also works on an important idea called theory Y, which came up, I think, about 30 years back. It works on an idea called theory Y, where it believes that the individual is intrinsically motivated to do well. And all that is required for a person to bring or for the organization to bring out the best in a person, it has to dangle a carrot in front, and they have enough intrinsic motivation to go towards the carrot. So the stick gets replaced with the carrot in the case of theory Y. All right. Now the carrots could be many. It could be increments, it could be promotions, it could be recognitions, or whatever it is. That's our private enterprises. Now, when we look at the idea of management, okay, management is nothing but distilled common sense through years of research and picking up some of the best practices in various organizations, putting them together in a nice and neat structure. My feeling is that some of these ideas seem not to get the right amount of attention that it should in an organization like a school. I'm not pointing out in any particular school, but in general, I feel some of the ideas which can really be adopted and used in a school effectively seem to pass by because schools come from a certain legacy, and that legacy is very different from the legacy of a private enterprise. So our whole idea for the next 6 sessions is to bring out some of these key elements of management. How can we adopt and incorporate some of those things in our schools, yet retaining all the good things which are there in our school at this point in time, and then so that we can function as one large, happy joint family. So that's really the idea. I wanted to give this before I started off on my presentation. So that's the general idea of saying that we want to try and bring some of those elements and see what is that we can incorporate inside our organizations, in what form and fashion can be incorporated. Okay, so I will share my presentation. Today's is going to be on what is called pursuit of excellence. Now, maybe a quick sanity check in terms of, can you see my presentation properly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Now, we will try and keep the didactic down to about 30 minutes or maybe 35 minutes, and then move straight into the case, which will be presented by Vidya. We almost know what the next slide is. We are what we repeatedly do, and therefore excellence is really not an act, but a habit. Okay, it's about doing the same thing repetitively, getting the right thing, and then doing it repetitively. So we completed the first 6 sessions in terms of mindset, cognitive biases, habits, all the neuroscience concepts, and then we had this wonderful session by Anita last week. And the next 6 sessions are really good. The next session is going to be on strategy and structure, then systems and processes, shared values and culture, finally tie it all up through leadership and connecting the dots. Okay. Now, when we talk about the idea of excellence, the idea of excellence is a cliched idea. Everybody wants to talk about this particular idea, and everybody says this is excellent and that is excellent and so on. Okay. It's a very, very oft repeated cliche. More often than not, it tends to get mixed up with efficiency and or idealism. I read it somewhere saying that if you shoot for idealism, what you come back with is excellence. Okay, I think it's somewhat true, but I don't fully agree with that. But it gets mixed up with ideas like doing things right, efficiency, or with some kind of a make-believe perfection, perfect world, which is this idea of idealism. To me, excellence is really the art of the possible. The art of the possible, which is about pragmatism And within that pragmatic framework, giving it our best is excellence. If we stray too far away from pragmatism, we cannot get anything done, but we can continue to give it our best. Or if we go too far into the other axis, what happens is we have things which are very, very practical, but we are not giving it our best. Okay. Is it a pragmatic possible idea, and giving it our best shot towards it is what I'm defining as excellence. The other thing about excellence is not an idea which is inborn, just like we saw leadership is not an inborn idea, or excellence similarly is not inborn. Personal and professional excellence both can be developed, and there are specific domains and steps which we need to follow, and through that will come excellence. Now, what are those domains? Okay. Essentially, there are 5 domains. I've combined 4th and 5th into one, but essentially there are 5 domains which are called 1, it's individual excellence. We'll spend a lot of time in terms of understanding what that is, in terms of individual excellence. The second is our interpersonal excellence. Individual excellence is really how do you manage yourself and your approach to work. Okay, how do you manage yourself and your approach to work? The next 6 sessions are primarily going to be about ourselves in the workspace. Yeah. Interpersonal excellence is really how effectively do we communicate, how effectively we work in a team, not with a team, in a team, and manage conflicts and differences, which is indigenous to every team. Then about operational excellence, a lot of us can relate to that quite straightforward, which is how effectively and successfully do we execute whatever plans we have laid out for ourselves. And the 4th and the 5th, which I've rolled into one, is really the organizational and leadership excellence, which is how well do we manage our teams? How do we contribute to the purpose, mission, vision, whatever we call it, of our organization? In today's session, we will really be spending time only on the first 2, which is individual excellence and interpersonal excellence. Operational excellence is something which we will take up in the next, when we talk about strategy and, not on strategy, on structure and systems, we'll come to operational excellence. And organizational and leadership excellence is something we'll come to later when we come to shared values and to leadership. Individual excellence, which is how do you manage yourself and your approach to work. There are 4 or 5 big elements or big ticket items within individual excellence. The first of them is called accountability and integrity. What is accountability and integrity? There are certain things which are demonstrated by an individual who is accountable and has high integrity. The first amongst them is accepting responsibility for mistakes. Now, this is a motherhood which all of us would have heard in some form or another, which is accepting responsibility for mistakes. But usually there are 2 things which happen here. One, we caveat it, saying that, well, I accept the responsibility for the mistake, but, okay. Accepting responsibility is completing the sentence without a but in it. Accepting responsibility is accepting it wholly and truly and deeply inside ourselves, not by saying, I accept, it's okay. I mean, I'm the head of the school, I accept the responsibility, but you know what? That but has to go away in terms of accepting responsibility, which is the process of caveating. The second thing is a lot of us find it easy to accept mistakes in domains, which is not our core domain. If my core domain, let us say, is the area of finance, then I'll be quite comfortable in accepting mistakes in all kinds of areas where I might be a doofus, But when it comes to finance, I might be very defensive when somebody points out a logical mistake or an obvious mistake I'm making in terms of my thought process. To be able to accept mistakes in our core domain and to be able to accept it without a but and a caveat at the end of it is about accepting responsibility and mistakes. The second, particularly relevant for folks who are heading up organizations like heads of schools, heads of primary school, secondary school, which is seeking, accepting, and acting on feedback. More often than not, if you're in a position of leadership, we don't get feedback, an honest feedback for sure. We may get a feedback on the positives and the negatives will be spoken behind our back. That's life. That's how it goes. But to be able to actively seek feedback and to accept the feedback as is, not interpreting it in a convenient way and acting on that particular feedback is a core element of individual excellence. Third, it's about authenticity. We have spoken about it in the past, which is one has to be pursued as truthful, direct, and trustworthy. And the person is what they see is what they get. That feeling has to be there for trust to grow. Otherwise, trust doesn't grow in an organization. If you're not authentic and if you're not being ourselves, trust doesn't grow. Okay. If you're different people to different, if you're different individuals to different people, then trust doesn't grow at all. Okay. Fourth is to be holding oneself accountable. That there is an action, there is an outcome, and I'm responsible and accountable for that particular action or outcome. And finally, individual excellence in terms of accountability and integrity is about walking the talk. A lot of us have a mission statement. My CEO used to say that in the previous organization. He used to say various organizations have these mission and vision and all these statements. If you go and ask them, don't look at the board. Now, can you tell me what is your vision or what is your mission? Most of us won't know for two reasons. One is we have not fully soaked it in, and therefore we are probably not walking that particular talk. We talk about what are our shared values. We talk about all these things. We talk about saying we have to model these things, but we don't walk the talk. Values is one area. We'll talk a lot more about it later. Values is one area where one will really not be effective if one talks about it, but far more effective if one walks it. In the sense, if one embodies the values, that's the only way to make a value go through an organization. Second is innovation and creativity. In innovation and creativity, the first thing is to be able to generate unique and new ideas. Not rehashed ideas, not developing on an existing idea, but to be able to truly creatively come up with a unique and a pragmatic solution to problems. That is something which is very essential when we are in a leadership position and we have to demonstrate individual excellence. One has to have a thought process which is original, which is different, which is unique, which is creative, and which is pragmatic as well. But these creative ideas have to be situated in a world which is what is called a VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, and all that. So, which is effectively something which adjusts to changing situations. A type of innovation. Why? Because there was a changing situation and schools had to adapt and adopt a new idea, adapt to the new situation and adopt a new idea. They be effectively. So effectively adjusting to changing situation is a key element of innovation and creativity. Third, we talk plenty about it, which is self-awareness. I'll just mention points here. Okay. Not at all saying any of the other points we have discussed in the past are not right, or they're critically important. Self-awareness is probably more important to individual excellence than anything else, but I just wanted to point out three things. First is about committing strongly to improving ourselves every day, every moment, committing ourselves strongly to improve ourselves is a great quality in terms of individual excellence. Second is completely open to criticisms. Not caveating, not defending, not blaming, not structuring and articulating back in terms of why it won't happen. It's about being completely open to criticism and taking that full accountability is in self-awareness. And the third one, which is more of a mindset, which is developing insight from mistakes. Mistakes are not really a reflection of the self. They are information. They're information which help us to be better as we go forward. We've spoken many times saying that mistakes is really very integral part of success. And the opposite of success is not making a mistake. Opposite of is giving up. Fourth, much easier said than done, is about knowing personal strengths and limits. The moment we rise up to a leadership position, we start growing a halo around our head, whether it exists or not. And therefore, we start imagining we are an expert in every field. We start imagining that we are an expert in every space, in every idea and every thought, which we are simply not. So knowing very, very truly in terms of what is that I properly know, what is that I know a little bit, what is that I don't know, is critically important when it comes to self-awareness. Knowing personal strengths and personal limits is very important as far as individual excellence within that self-awareness is concerned. Fourth is about problem solving and decision making. This is a bit about the strategic news, which is able to consider of issues and factors and their linkages. Because our years of experience will tell us that while we can pursue something in a certain way, these are the things which will give, or these are the compromises I need to make. These are the things I need to give up on and be pragmatic about it if I have to go to that particular end. So being able to consider a wide range of issues and factors and their interlinkages is key when it comes to individual excellence and in a leadership position. Ability to look beyond the obvious. Most of us can actually understand when a problem is articulated, but we don't know which might be there and the hidden problems which are there. Third, about honesty in analysis. This is quite possible and quite easily learnable. All analysis has to be zero up. Means any of our preconceived notions, any of our personal biases, of our personal preferences don't creep in when it comes to an analysis. There are very many ways to actually work on this, to come up with the whole analysis and consider it as completely false and come up with another analysis, which could be a plausible analysis. Okay, if you are struggling to come up with a second round of analysis, which is very different from the first one, chances are the first one is biased. There are plenty of ways in which that can be effectively done. To be able to use good quality logic, this all comes from a good quality mind and a good quality logic with the emotions woven in. Finally, and critically important is to be able to effectively manage people and tasks. What is that? There are times when we need something done, and if we go about it in a certain way to sort of hurt people or ruffle feathers or step on them or do something which they might not find as something which is I'm not getting the right word. You get the sense of what I'm saying. And the other one is concern for people's needs. Okay, if we overbalance on either of two things, we will get work done for some amount of time, but the people will not be happy about it, and therefore over a period of time it will just wither away. If you are excessively focused on people's needs, then nothing will get done, but we'll be a popular leader. So the idea is not to be a popular leader, not to be a dictator, but to be able to find that middle ground in terms of balancing what are the people's needs and what are the tasks that needs to get done. And all of this gets resolved quite easily if the trust in that particular environment is very high. People will understand. So it will come to a place where people say, I don't like it. Okay. And that's a reasonable place to be in when we are running organizations, because that's a space that we have to be pragmatic about it. We can't please all the people all that. So that's it. About individual excellence is really accountability and one is that taking accountability and not blame a situation. And the other one is to be able to all mistakes and things which have gone wrong as information, which will inform us in terms of our new decisions we need, problem solving and decision making. All right. Those are the things which we need to focus on when it comes to individual excellence. Then we move to interpersonal excellence. Now, interpersonal excellence is again a few domains which are there in interpersonal excellence. The first of them is immediately we have to bring the people together, which is collaboration and teamwork. Now, this is one of the toughest things to do, which is establishing meaningful connection with others. Okay. At a personal level, we kind of relate to that other individual and we are able to connect with them at a personal level. Very tough to do. We can all relate to in an organization. We can all relate to the work, which is common amongst all of us, to be able to relate to individuals. Establishing meaningful connections with others is an important. The second one is to be able to truly take in others' ideas and to directly implement it inside without adapting it, without changing it. When there is a good idea, to give it a proper shot, okay? Without giving it R2 bits, to give it a proper shot and truly take in others' ideas increases and empowerment dramatically in an organization. Ultimately, if the idea goes right, then it's that particular individual. I mean, we can very honestly, that particular individual is the one who really made it happen. And I'm glad that the person took that ownership and made that happen. Or in some cases, if it doesn't go too well, we have to have the maturity and the sincerity to take that flack on ourselves, right? So the bouquets belong to the team, the brickbats to the leader. That's how it is in leadership. Shows a very, very important and a keen interest in others' inputs and skills. And the fourth one, very important, sharing the ownership, the credit for the success, and the visibility. Okay. When something is going public, it could be in a school forum, it could be a newspaper, it could be anything else, to be able to hand over the visibility as well is an important trait when it comes to interpersonal excellence in terms of collaboration and teamwork. The second area in interpersonal excellence, I just want to be mindful of the time. Yeah. The second area of interpersonal excellence is about conflict management. Okay. Conflicts again is there in every organization. Okay. It is not at all something which is unique to any organization. Conflicts are there everywhere. Okay. Able to address a conflict head on, not to try and hope that this will not. Conflicts have this unique ability to continue to grow if you don't address it. Okay, this is not one of those things we give it adequate time and even this will pass, this will not. This will just grow. Not only that, it will start feeding back inside every individual's head and the problem will start growing in our heads. There is no new data which is happening, but the problem would have grown in our heads to a much, much larger thing than where it started off. Okay. So instead of avoiding it, to be able to address it, while we are handling that conversation, okay, we are not sort of listening to the other person, but rehearsing what is the point we are going to say next. More often than not, when it comes to listening, most of us are hearing what the other person is saying and already preparing a reaction to what the other person has already said. Okay, patient and focused listening and the point which is coming from them. And the third is really about pragmatism, which is finding the common ground of saying, if I were to draw Venn diagrams, there are certain priorities you have, there are certain priorities I have, there are think in a certain way. What are those places where we have a common ground? What are those places where you're willing to give something? What are those places I'm willing to cede ground on something? And to be able to evolve that particular solution is at the core of conflict management. Third part, which is to be easy to talk to and an approachable person, to be able to relate across levels. Amount of a certain type of stakeholder management, but might not be all that comfortable with our fellow teachers. We might be comfortable with our teachers and not so much with parents. We might be comfortable with parents, not with people, not just different stakeholders, and also across levels. Okay, everybody in that school is somebody we can relate to and ask a question or two to them. And third, has flexibility and listens without interpretation and interruption. This is somewhat similar to the earlier point. Listening to the other person fully, whatever they have to say, without us rehearsing what is that we are going to react back with, without us countering that point, without us interrupting the thought flow or interpret. And the last of them is our ability to communicate, which is able to convey ideas to others quite precisely, clearly, and be able to present things in different settings and to be able to communicate with people in different settings and different stakeholders, where we manage effective attention through good understanding of the group dynamics. Really interpersonal smart in that sense, to be able to understand which are those people who work well and what is that which happens within the dynamics within a team. Many times, we might imagine certain things, but overall, with some experience, get a fair sense of what the group dynamics when there is a large group, and to be able to effectively steer through that particular thing in terms of good understanding of group dynamics is there in terms of speaking and presenting, which is really about communication. Of course, there are other things like written communication and all kinds of things are there. I've just picked up 3 or 4 key elements to interpersonal excellence. So interpersonal excellence is really these 4 things: collaboration and teamwork. Super important is conflict management, interpersonal smarts, and finally communication. Okay. Now, we talked about 5 domains. The domains were individual, interpersonal, operational, and organizational and leadership. Right? What is operational? Prioritization. What is delegation? What are the things I to do? What are the things I need to hand over? And how do I decide what to delegate and what not to delegate? How do I embed information technology and the power of computing and the power of a computer into my systems and processes. Not use it in a way that, like they say, if you have a hammer, the whole world looks like nails, because we feel like banging everything which is there. Information technology, more often than not, is used like that. Okay, the moment we have a computer, we actually have a problem because we have the computing power. That's not the way it should happen. It should be that we have a problem and the computing power can solve the problem, not that I have a computing power and therefore let me imagine a problem which is much bigger than what it actually is. And finally, time management, where we spend enough time. Organizational and leadership excellence is about how do we work with change? What is resilience? Second is customer focus. Third one is our general mental strategically, and organization acumen, building teams, and managing and measuring work. Okay, so these are some managing and measuring work. In some way can go into operations, but I've just left it here because I think it's more organization and leadership skill in terms of managing and measuring work, where at least I personally believe the HR manager for every individual measuring work. Therefore, all reviews have to be done with the immediate boss and not with anyone else. Okay, so those are the excellence domains, right? Individual excellence, interpersonal excellence, operational excellence, organizational, and leadership excellence. So we have today done individual excellence and interpersonal excellence in some depth. Operational we will do later. Organization and leadership as well, we will do sometime later. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the end of the current didactic part of the session. Are there any questions? Let me stop sharing. Yeah. Before we go into Vidya's case, we can handle some questions if there are any. Okay, we'll go into Vidya. Are you ready?